Now that we had a first look at what Ionic is, and no worries if that was a lot, we'll learn about these different building blocks step by step throughout the course. We'll learn about the web components, and then we'll learn about capacitor and how that works together. No worries. But now that we learned about that, what is Angular? And I want to be honest here, you should know that. Knowing Angular is a prerequisite to this course. There is a complete refresher module after this first module. This is entirely optional, and it should really just be a refresher. It will not teach you Angular from the ground up. It will only refresh your knowledge, in case it's been some time since you last worked with Angular. Knowing Angular is a prerequisite, and if you don't, check out my complete Angular guide to learn all about Angular, which you will also need in this course. Angular is, of course, a framework which makes the development of web apps, JavaScript-driven web apps, easier and more fun and more allows us to write more powerful apps because we don't have to focus on the nitty-gritty details, but we can use Angular to take care about all the rendering of the UI and of creating a nice single-page application. And we can focus on our business logic. And therefore, tools or frameworks like Angular help us write highly reactive JavaScript-driven web apps. It's absolutely optional. We could do everything with vanilla JavaScript, but then we really couldn't because we would have to reinvent the wheel all over the place. We would probably introduce bugs, and Angular does the same we could do, but in a best practice way. It makes the way free for us to work and focus on our own business logic. And we also use Angular to build so-called single-page applications, which are apps that run on one and the same HTML page, where this page or parts of this page are constantly re-rendered via JavaScript, in the end triggered and controlled through Angular, but which to the user looks like sometimes the entire page changes. And that simply creates the illusion of having different pages we can switch between, whilst all the transitions and so on are instant because it's JavaScript running in the browser. We don't need to wait for a server response. And that's why we build apps with JavaScript and why we power so much logic in our apps with JavaScript. Now, in an Ionic app, we essentially would want to use a framework like Angular because it helps us with complex problems like state or data management between different pages, for example, which can become quite difficult in bigger apps. And it helps us with things like routing or navigation, so switching between these different pages and passing data around between them and so on. And I will come back to this later in the course. This is Angular. As I said, if it's been some time since you last worked with it, have a look at this refresher I have after this module. If Angular isn't your thing, then this might not be 100% the right course for you, but I want to highlight at this point that Ionic also works with just JavaScript, no framework at all, or with other frameworks or libraries. So you can use it with React or Vue as well if you want. You should still, in case you want to go that route and you don't want to refund the course, which is nice, of course, you should go through the quick start parts, the first sections of this course to learn how Ionic works, and you will then still be able to use that knowledge with these other frameworks, even though some things will differ there, but you will know which things differ by the end of these first sections, because the Ionic components you use and the way you use them will be the same. And speaking of that, it's time to get our hands dirty and start using some Ionic components.